All right. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, everybody. David G., grateful recovering alcoholic, lustaholic from Oklahoma. Grateful for a sobriety date in both programs, August of 94 in Alcoholics Anonymous and October 1st of 2019 in Sexaholics Anonymous. Very grateful for sobriety in both of those areas today in my life. What a true miracle it has been, not only for me, but for many, many of us, many more to come. Grateful to be back this week. I was down with COVID for a little bit, my wife and myself both. And I want to thank you all for your prayers and all of the good words and thoughts that you sent out to us. We're truly grateful to have a fellowship of people today that really, really have our best interest in heart, and we theirs. It's really grateful. I do have my number one confidant with me here today. She's kind of relaxing here on the couch with me. I'm not going to put any video on her, but she is here today for the first time during this BBU series. So I'm very grateful to have her here with me, help keep me honest. But, it's always good to have her in a meeting with me anywhere that I go, especially after some things that had happened about 17 months ago. We wasn't sure if that was ever going to happen again. But God's grace and power is much bigger than any of that stuff. So, again, we are grateful to be here today. We are in working with others. We have traveled through the book all these weeks up to page 96. And, we're looking at where we make the second visit. I never really seen the importance of making a second visit. I thought, I'll come one time. If you don't want to hear the message, I'll leave, and that'll be the end of it. But there are times whenever God puts it on our heart to go back more than one time. And in fact, Dennis and I was talking about this just yesterday. There are times whenever, we're definitely going to have to make more than one visit. And that's been the case for a long, long time. So we left off, I think, right there where it says, suppose now, in the middle of page 96. And, I'm just grateful for this step. I just want to say that through everything that I went through for 25 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, with all the secrets and all the acting out and all the stuff that happened, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt today that had it not been for my passion to continue to try to help others to find a new way to live, there's no doubt that I probably would have fell by the wayside. So I'm grateful to have had the experience and been able to help others to recovery. But I am definitely grateful for it today, because today I have a true solid message that I can carry, and I'm clean in all those areas of my life. So I sure am grateful for that. So we're going to pick up right there on page 96, and we're going to start working with others, and we're going to kind of bounce back and forth in the book, some looking at connectors like we've been doing and sharing experience, strength, and hope. I don't expect to drop any big ahas, God falling out of the sky or any of that. But I do have experience in this chapter as well as with the rest of the book. And I believe until we've had this experience, really, we're just running around kind of sharing whatever we share. But the book tells me that I can give a lot of advice through my experience here. And you hear sometimes in meetings that advice is one thing that we definitely want to stay away from. We don't want to give advice to anyone. Well, my book's going to say something different right here from the start. So let's start right here where it says, suppose you are making your second visit to a man, and he has read this volume and says he's prepared to go through with the 12 steps of the program of recovery. So in other words, we know that if he has read this, he's prepared to do that. And we're becoming willing now to lead him through the first 6 chapters. And we're going to lead him through the first 11 steps to have the experience as it's laid out. Now, the book says, haven't had this experience yourself. And that should be a question for me. Have I had this experience myself? Because if I haven't, then I'm probably going to be offering him something other than the program. I'm going to be offering him my version of it. And that doesn't work out very well. But the sentence that I was talking about just a little bit ago is located right here. You can give him much practical advice. So if I've had this experience through these first 6 chapters, and I have, then I can give much practical advice. I still try to stay away from that some. I don't really like that as much, but I do share experience, strength, and hope, and advice will be based off of my experience, nothing else. Let him know you're available if he wishes to make a decision and tell his story, but do not insist upon it if he prefers to consult someone else. Now, that used to bother me in the beginning. If I spent a little time with a man, I felt like I ought to be the one that got to work with him. I felt like this and that. Today, that really doesn't matter. If he chooses to consult someone else, I encourage that. because there are a lot of people very capable of carrying this message. A lot of people that are on this call today very capable of that. The book says if he may be broken homeless, and you might try to help him about getting a job or giving him a little financial assistance. Now, I don't know about this so much in Sexaholics Anonymous, but I know a lot about it in Alcoholics Anonymous. And sometimes this can work good and bad. You know, I've brought people in, I've helped people to find jobs, I've helped them with social assistance. But one thing that I have to really be careful of is they will begin to depend more on me than they will on God. And as far as their recovery goes, whenever it comes to taking care of this for themselves. So really, for myself these days, I try to stay out of that. If I can be of help, I am. But if I give a person money or if I do that, today it's with no expectation of it being returned. And that's just me. The book says you should not deprive your family or creditors of money that they should have. Perhaps you'll want to take the man into your home for a few days. Now, I don't know about in SA, but I know in AA that I had done that before, not in this marriage, but in a prior one. And that really didn't turn out to be a very good deal. Now, I know in the old days of Alcoholics Anonymous, they did that quite a bit. In fact, if you'll hold your place there with me and you'll jump over to page 155 in this book, this is how it really began, you know, with Bill and Bob in this area. So looking at page 155, bottom paragraph, he says this: being intrigued, however, he invited our friend to his home. Now, this was Bill that had done this to Bob. Sometime later, and just as he thought he was getting control of his liquor situation, he went on a roaring bender. We're talking about Dr. Bob here. For him, it was the spree that ended all sprees, and he saw that he could have to face his problem squarely, that God may give him mastery. So the book goes on to talk about this is the morning that Bob stepped out. He took the bull by the horns and he set out to tell those he feared about his troubles had been, and he found himself surprisingly well received. So there is good experience in sometimes taking a man into your home. For me, I try not to do that as much. We have done that for a few people that have not been in the program. And we just have to be very careful about that. Just like the next sentence is going to say, be sure you use discretion. Be certain he'll be welcomed by your family and that he's not trying to impose on you for money, connections, or shelter. Permit that and you'll only harm him, because shelter and all that becomes more important than does recovery. I've had people come and do that, and, you know, the deal would be, well, you need to make so many meetings a week. You need to do this. You need to do that. I put down all of these expectations, and in the beginning, they would start to do that, and after a while, they'd fall away from it, and it just really didn't turn out that good. So this is what usually happens. You will be making it possible for him to be insincere. You may be aiding to his destruction rather than his recovery. Never avoid these responsibilities, but be sure you are doing the right thing if you assume them. And here it is. Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. Now, we've talked about the cornerstone as outlined on page 47 in this book in the second step. We've talked about the keystone, which is located on page 63 of this book, because that we are building the arch. And as we work the steps, we are laying these stones to walk through this. Well, there's one final stone, and this is the stone, and it's the foundation stone of our recovery. And it's that we will help others. A kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You have to act the Good Samaritan every day if need be. Now, it may mean the loss of many nights' sleep, great interference with your pleasures, interruptions to your business. It may mean sharing your money in your home, counseling frantic wives and relatives, innumerable trips to the police courts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, and asylums. And your telephone may jangle at any time of the day or night. Now, we know in the 1930s, things were a lot different than they are today. There's probably not a lot of us that are going to put up with that. I'll guarantee you there's a lady sitting over here beside me that's not going to put up with a whole lot of that for sure. Your wife may sometimes say that she's neglected. A drunk may smash the furniture in your home, burn the mattress. You may have to fight with him if he's violent. I've had to do all these things with drunks. I really have. Sometimes you will have to call a doctor and administer sedatives under his direction. That's never been my experience. I don't care to do any of that. But another time you may have to send for the police or an ambulance, and occasionally you'll have to meet such conditions. So the best thing to do is what it says here. we seldom allow an alcoholic or a sexaholic to live in our home for very long at a time. It's not good for him, and it sometimes creates serious complications in a family. I'm just not willing to risk any of that. My recovery today is in a good place, and I just don't want to jeopardize any of that. I will help a man however I can to find a place to go if he needs shelter. But some of the things that it mentions in this book, I don't do that. Though an alcoholic does not respond, there's no reason why you should neglect his family. You should continue to be friendly to them, and the family should be offered your way of life. Should they accept and practice spiritual principle, there is a much better chance that the head of the family will recover. Even though he continues to drink or act out, the family will find life more bearable. For the type of alcoholic who is willing and able to get well, little charity in the ordinary sense of the word is needed or wanted. And I've seen this over and over. There's a lot of guys that come into the program and they feel like if, they need to get this in order, they need to get a job, and I understand all of that. That's very important. But I know for me and my recovery, until I was on solid ground with my recovery, none of that mattered anyway. I'm not going to have any of that because my mind is going to be somewhere else. I'm still going to be caught up in the obsession to lust and act out. And so my career was going down the tubes anyway. It says the men that cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol or freedom from acting out, they're on the wrong track. Yet we do go to great extremes to provide each other with these very things when such action is warranted. This may seem inconsistent. We think it is not. So let's take a look for just a minute at page 128. I want to connect this to this next paragraph. If you'll hold your place there on 128 and come back to 98, I want to read that paragraph or some of that paragraph, and then I want to fall into what it talks about over here that connects to this, where it says this: it is not the matter of giving that is in question, but when and how to give. And that often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane and the alcoholic sexaholics commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God, he clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol or acting out until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. Job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not stop drinking or acting out as long as we place the dependence of other people upon the dependence ahead of God. And I know 17 months ago, she was definitely leaving home. But I did know in my heart at that time that no matter what happened, I was going to have to do something about this problem that had chased me for all these years. So by the grace of God, she did end up staying, and all of that has since passed. But if you look at page 128, it says this, and I think this is probably one of the most guiding principles in the entire program. And I do look at this a lot as it's connected to step 3. Giving rather than getting will become the guiding principle. But it's when to give and how to give versus what to give. For me today, it's not so much about money or any of that, but I do give my time. I give a lot of my time to other sexaholics and other alcoholics in the program. I'm up at 4 a.m. every morning. My phone begins to ring shortly thereafter. And by about 5 o'clock that evening, Central Standard Time is whenever I usually shut it down. Now, I used to go ahead and work with 2 or 3 guys a night in the evenings, 2 or 3 times a week. And that would take a lot of time away from my wife. After coming to Sexaholics Anonymous, doing this work, having this experience, and starting to work with others again, there's just certain things I do not do unless it's a 911. After 5 o'clock my time, I don't give that time to anyone else. I give all that time to my wife. During the weekends, I give all that time to my wife. Now, if it's a 911, I understand that. I'm more than happy to answer the phone, but there's a lot of other people in the fellowship that can be called. So giving rather than getting becomes the guiding principle, and I'm willing to give all of the time that I have. But there are certain times that I am not today, and those are definitely one of them. And it says this: assume on the other hand that he's had an outright stern spiritual experience overnight. As it were, he is a different man. There's a promise. He becomes a religious enthusiast. He's unable to focus on anything else. You ever see anybody do that, come in and get a hold of the program, and man, they run away with it. And that's all to the good, but it can get in the way. It definitely can. So we want to be very careful of that. So, all right, let's go back. I think we were there at page 98. And there again, it's not a matter of giving that is in question, but when and how to give. That often makes the difference between failure and success. I think we read all that. So next paragraph down. Burn into the idea, the consciousness of every man, that he can get well regardless of anyone. What a promise right there. He can get well. He will get well regardless of anyone. But there is a condition, and that condition is that he trusts God and clean house. And for me, the only way I've ever been able to do that is through these steps as they're outlined in this book. Well, now about the domestic problem. I don't know about any of you guys, but I know about me, and I've had a lot of domestic problems through the years. And it says there may be divorce, separation, or just strained relations. When your prospect has made such reparations as he can to the family, and he's thoroughly explained to them the new principles by which he is living, he should proceed to put those principles into action into his own home. If you remember back on page 19, it talked to us about that very early in the book, about how important it was to show a demonstration in our home. So if you'll flip over there for just a second, let's take a look at that on page 19, where it says this: none of us make a sole vocation of this work, nor do we feel its effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel that the elimination of our drinking or acting out is but a beginning. I see that as a warning. That's warning me. That's only the beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lie before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. And so that's exactly where I'm going to put to work the principles more than any other place than I've ever tried to apply them in all of the years is going to be in my home now, because that's where life is for me today. I had a sponsor, and he once told me, he said, David, you take care of everything under your roof. The rest of the world will take care of its own self. You take care of what's under your roof. And he said that I don't know how many times. So I believe it. I really do. And also the domestic problem is it's talked about a little more in depth there on page 80. And most of us can definitely relate to this. We're going to drop to the bottom paragraph on page 80, holding our place back there. And we're going to look at how some of us on this call have definitely had this experience. The chances are that we had domestic troubles. Perhaps we're mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. We doubt if in this respect alcoholics or sexaholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. But that behavior does complicate sex relations in the home. After a few years with an alcoholic sexaholic, she gets worn out, resentful, uncommunicative. How can she be anything else? But we have to be careful, because this is kind of how our mindset is. We begin to feel lonely and sorry for ourselves when we commence to look around in nightclubs or other places for their equivalent, something besides liquor. And of course, you know the rest of the story on that. But these domestic troubles, thank God, today have been overcome by the grace of God and through these 12 steps. And it's just a beautiful way to live. So the book's back on page 98, and let's pick up there where we left off. It says, that is if he's lucky enough to have a home to begin with. Many of us aren't. Though his family be at fault in many respects, he should not be concerned about that. He should concentrate on his own spiritual demonstration. There again, I want to show a demonstration in my life today, not so much about talk about spiritual discoveries and what I've found. And if you'll do this and you'll do that, then this will happen for you. No, I want to show a demonstration. But the biggest place I want to show that is in my home and with my wife. Argument and fault finding are to be avoided like the plague. Remember in step 4, it talked to us about that on page 67, where we did the prayer work. It told us that this stuff is poison. It's going to kill us if we don't get rid of it. In many homes, this is a difficult thing to do, but it must be done if any results are to be expected. If persisted in for a few months, the effect on a man's family is sure to be very great. So on page 124 of the book, there's just so much here that can be connected to all of this. Middle of the page, it says the painful past may be of infinite value to other families still struggling with their problem. We think each family who has been relieved owe something to those who have not. And I believe that with all my heart today. I do. I believe my family has, by God's grace, has been relieved of this. And I do believe that I need to share this with other families. I do. However, I try not to work with anybody, one or the other. If I do that with a family, they're going to have to be together. I know in Alcoholics Anonymous, we used to do that. You know, if the man come in and he was drinking, his wife was tore up, she came to meetings or whatever, then we would encourage her to continue to come even though he left. And although that is a good idea, I do believe today that's not my experience anymore. That's not for me. So I'm definitely more than willing to send them to somebody who can help them. That somebody would not be me. So showing others who suffer how we were given help is the very thing that makes life seem so worthwhile to us now. I love this. Cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession that you and I have. With that, we can avert death and misery for others. It's unbelievable how deep the power of God can go. It just is. So back to page 99, and we're just kind of reading along here and sharing experience. So after we've seen tangible results, let's start there. The family will perhaps want to go along. These things will come to pass naturally and in good time, provided, however, the alcoholic sexaholic continues to demonstrate that he can be sober, considerate, helpful, regardless of what anyone says or does. Of course, we all fall much below this standard many times, but we must try to repair the damage immediately, make amends. At least we pay the penalty by a spree. That's some definite hard suggestions to do, especially whenever you first got into discovery. You've been discovered, and I don't know about any of you guys, but I know in my own experience that was a terrible time, and it took a long time to move through that. So thank God this didn't happen in this paragraph. If there be divorce or separation, there should be no undue haste for the couple to get together. The man should be sure of his recovery. And I do feel like for the first time in my life, I was sure of my recovery, even though I had been discovered. I really didn't know which way I was going to go, but I did know that I was going into recovery. I was not going backwards with the illness. I knew that. The wife should fully understand his new way of life. If their old relationship is to be resumed, it must be on a better basis since the former did not work. Now, this means a new attitude and spirit all around. And sometimes it is to the best interest of all concerned that the couple remain apart. Obviously, no rule can be laid down. Let the alcoholic continue his program day by day. When the time for living together has come, it'll be apparent for both parties. So there again, page 128 of the book over here. And I know I'm bouncing over to that chapter quite a bit, but this really kind of gives us a little more insight on that when it says this. When father takes this tack, middle of the page, the family may react unfavorably. They may be jealous of a God who has stolen dad's affection, while grateful that he drinks no more. They may not like the idea that God has accomplished the miracle where they failed. This happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous whenever I was married, and there was a lady who had tried to get me sober for I don't know how long, a lot of years, and it just never worked. And eventually, whenever I came in, I did get sober. You know, I did see there was a lot of jealousy there, even though they were grateful that I didn't drink anymore. They wasn't real happy that I had found a way to talk about God that didn't involve their religion. I just couldn't get sober there. I tried, but it just never worked out. But this next sentence, they often forget Father was beyond human aid. And I think sometimes it's very easy for us to do that. I forget that with my son sometimes. My son has been a chronic heroin addict for a lot of years. By God's grace, he's been sober for more than 2 years now, thankfully. But there are a lot of times, even in his addiction, I would forget that he was beyond human aid. I would expect him to snap out of this or to do this or to do that. And he just wasn't able to do any of that. But today, you know, it's a great thing to see recovery at work in that young man's life and to see what God has done there. It's been beautiful. The book says they may not see why their love and devotion did not straighten him out. Dad's not so spiritual after all, they say. If he means to right his past wrongs, step 9, why all this concern for everyone in the world but his family? What about his talk with God will take care of them? They suspect he's a bit balmy. So this is learning how to live. Whenever we wake up, a man once told me it's almost like shaking an infant awake and then just walking off and leaving him. When we walk through these first 6 chapters with someone and they have a spiritual experience, I do believe it is our job to stay with them and to walk the path with them. In fact, the book says that it's absolutely necessary that we walk shoulder to shoulder. So bottom of 99, let's look at that for just a few minutes, and then we'll close over on 100 for this week and come back next week and finish it up. But it says this: let no alcoholic or sexaholic say that he cannot recover unless he has his family back. This just isn't so. In some cases, the wife will never come back for one reason or another. Remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon people. It is dependent upon his relationship with God. We have seen men get well whose families have not returned at all, and we've seen others slip when the family come back too soon. So what an experience I've had with that. I've been drunk and I've been sober on both sides of that. But this is probably my favorite paragraph in all of working with others, and I want to connect this over to page 132 in the book. It says, page 100 here says this: both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. There it is. Once we awaken, this is what we want to do. There's some guys on this call today that I absolutely trust with my life. I do. And one of the good things about coming to Sexaholic Anonymous is I have been able to walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress with them. The book says this: if you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things that came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands was better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. So whether she's leaving home or whether she's coming home, whether the job is gone or the new job has come, no matter what the present circumstances may be, I know today that I can recover. So let's take a look at page 132. And we're going to drop down to the second to the last paragraph on that page. And it says this: so we think cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness. Outsiders are sometimes shocked when we burst into merriment over a seemingly tragic experience out of the past. But why shouldn't we laugh? We have recovered, the greatest promise in this book, and been given the power to help others. That power is a gift. If you remember in step 1, we were powerless. We were dying when we got here. Mentally, physically, spiritually, we were dying. We worked through the first step. We really seen that there was no hope. We got to page 45 in the book. We seen that lack of power was our dilemma, that we needed to connect back to the power, and that if we did that, we would recover from a hopeless state of mind. And as we worked through those steps and we got up to step 10, it showed us exactly how to connect back to the power. It told us that we wouldn't fight anything or anyone anymore. And as long as we done certain things, we'd be safe and protected and put in a neutral place. Well, as a result of doing that and doing it as best that we can to give this message to someone else, this loving grace that we've received over here, the greatest promise of all of it falls into place for me, what we just read. We have recovered and been given the power to help others. Man, that's the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me. We have a gift that doctors don't have, that psychiatrists don't have. I mean, we have been given the power to help others to come away from a way of life that was absolutely killing them. And I don't know about you, but for me, everything that I ever went through, everything that I ever put everybody through, to be given this, it was all worth it. So I'm very grateful for the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm very grateful for these first 7 chapters. I know today that I experienced in the last 23 or 24 weeks that we've been doing this. We've took a close, in-depth look on how to recover from this. Now we know it's our job to hand this over to another person. We come back next week. We're going to finish this chapter off, and that's going to end the series. Usually the first 7 chapters is all that we've ever done as far as the book study with me. There's other people that do the rest of the book and read on through, and that's good. And I encourage you to do that with anyone that you choose. But I just hope that it has been as good for you as it has been for me. This has changed my recovery in a way that I could have never imagined. And I've done these studies with a lot of people in a lot of places, a lot of groups in a lot of states. But I really have to say that by coming and doing it, these 23 or 24 weeks, however long it's been, has been the greatest experience that's ever happened for me in my recovery. I celebrated a year here with you guys through these weeks. I moved into 11 months, 12, now 15, up to 17. And day by day, just walking the path of spiritual progress. My life has changed completely. My marriage is in a better place than it's ever been. I'm looking forward to continuing to be a servant in Sexaholics Anonymous in the days and weeks and months ahead. I know that there will be other workshops, and we've talked about doing the traditions later on after taking a little break, maybe coming back and doing the traditions some. My partner and I that do the Big Book Stays Alive in Alcoholics Anonymous are going to be doing a lot of things with workshops and stuff as well. And I'm just so grateful to have any of you guys attend that would like to be a part of that. The book will always be a part of my life. Always, always. I could never imagine it not being. It has been for all these years, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. I do love the literature and essay as well. Please don't ever think that just because I'm always talking about this book, that there hasn't been wonderful things in those books that have helped me so much, especially the little book, Step into Action, the white book. I love all of those books. I do. But for me to recover is the big book of AA, and that's me. So I know that today I'm not just here to be sober. I'm here to recover. And by the grace of God, I have one more day. So thank you for letting me share. And thank you again for all your prayers for my wife and I. We're so grateful. Thanks, Dennis, for your service, brother.